Today we're going to make a giant porch swing out of an old satellite dish. Originally we were planning on making a porch swing out of 2x lumber, but material prices are kind of crazy right now, so we've been trying to upcycle more junk. My sister Jessie's house used to have hoarders living there, so we basically have our own junkyard. And this satellite dish has caught my eye a few times, so I finally decided to pull it out of the pile and see what I could do with it. It's well over 6 feet in diameter, and it's mostly made out of perforated aluminum reinforced with a few key steel parts. The steel bracket in the middle was totally rusted, and it looks like people had used this as a fire pit and melted parts of the aluminum. The edge is reinforced by thin galvanized sheet metal and has some short aluminum brackets that help strengthen the connections between the perforated aluminum quarter panels. I want to reinforce the whole thing, and I'm starting at the perimeter. I'm using some steel flat bar, and I'm going to drill holes so that I can use the same bolting pattern that's on the existing reinforcing plates. I traced the outline of the aluminum brackets onto the steel and then started drilling holes. I use my rotary tool to turn these pairs of holes into slots that will give me a little bit more room and flexibility with the bolts. I then added additional holes every foot. The center was an absolute mess of rusted steel and melted aluminum, so I just used my angle grinder to remove the center. I'm going to cut a circle out of some thin plate steel to replace the center piece. It's really not that hard to cut circles like this out of steel. I just use a thin blade on my angle grinder, go slow, and follow the line. I cut some slots in the circle so that the folded up parts of the perforated aluminum panels can turn up and slide through these slots. I'm going to reinforce the bottom by welding on some 1.5 inch steel angle. I cut the first piece about 4 to 6 inches wider than the diameter of the circle, and then I cut 2 smaller pieces to form sort of a cross. I cut a notch in one of those shorter pieces so that it would fit around the long piece of angle steel. I welded them in place, and now I have a nice rigid disc with fins made out of the angle steel that I can bolt to the perforated aluminum. Now that I have my new pieces ready to reinforce it, I started removing the rest of the aluminum brackets and replacing them with longer steel bars. I put a piece of 1 inch wide flat bar on the inside, and the holes there align with the longer pieces of 1.5 inch wide steel that I'm bolting onto the outside. I started at the seams, which are the weakest parts, bolted everything in nice and tight, and then wrapped the steel around, clamped it in place, and then drilled through the existing perimeter so that I could bolt this steel reinforcing bar to the dish. I trimmed the pieces, leaving about 3 to 4 inches of overlap, and then welded the steel pieces together. Now I have a strong steel perimeter that's firmly bolted to the existing satellite dish. I bent some steel rod to make loops that I can weld to this exterior steel band so that it'll have 4 sturdy points to connect the dish to the chains that I'm going to use to hang it. This steel rod came from the scrap pile and it was pretty rusty, so I brushed it off before clamping it to the perimeter and welding them on. We placed the bottom, used a hammer to force everything into place, and then ran bolts through the angle steel and the perforated aluminum fins. The bottom was pretty deformed and bent, so it took a little bit of hammering to flatten it back out, and then we drilled holes through the aluminum and the steel, and then added a whole bunch of bolts to make everything nice and secure. I used the angle grinder to trim some of the pieces that extended a little bit too far, and decided to weld on a few additional steel straps for a little bit of extra structural security. I painted both sides with Krylon Fusion All-In-One Spray Paint with 5 times stronger adhesion. This is a fantastic product. You don't need primer, and it has excellent adhesion to just about any material. I've already used it on wood, plastic, aluminum, steel, and even fiberglass, and I've had great results with all surfaces. And shout out to Krylon for sponsoring not just this video, but this entire patio renovation series. I'll put links to where you can get the product in the description, and check out their full range of awesome colors. The swing is going to hang from a 4x4 that's reinforced with a 2x6. And while I'm not concerned about the structural strength of these wooden members, I do want to make sure the eye bolt doesn't slowly dig and tear into the wood. So I just took another scrap piece of steel bar and drilled some holes in it. This way I have a nice long bracket to really distribute the load from the eye bolt. To protect the raw steel from the weather, I just hit both sides with Krylon Fusion All-In-One with 5 times stronger adhesion in flat white. And once again, it's so nice not having to use a primer. I screwed the steel plate on top of the lumber and then drilled a hole all the way through. I then inserted a heavy-duty eye bolt and used a couple of nuts and washers to secure it. The swing is supported by 4 chains, but I want the top to swing freely, so I used a swivel joint, 2 big carabiners, and then 2 smaller carabiners attached to the bottom one, each that holds 2 chains. The chains are the weakest part of the structure, but each one of them is rated at 350 pounds. I used anchor shackles to secure the chains to the welded on loops and was ready to test it out. But first I added in some outdoor cushions that were meant for lounge chairs. I was pleasantly surprised by both how secure and comfortable it was, and so I just trimmed off the excess chain. This new reinforced satellite dish weighs about 55 pounds, and I can't emphasize how comfortable this swinging lounge is. The curvature is perfect for relaxing, and unlike a hammock, it doesn't squeeze you together on the sides. It's basically become the VIP lounge here at Maker Ranch and is everyone's favorite outdoor napping spot. We still have another episode coming, and this is where we're really going to focus on adding a lot of plants. So stay tuned, and shout out to Krylon for sponsoring this series. Check the links in the description to see the other projects that are referenced in this video and to learn about the product giveaway that Krylon is doing. Okay, that's it for now. See you in the next episode.